Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. American 186 declaring a medical emergency.
I got sent this audio because someone said they thought it was extremely disrespectful that these pilots of Air Force One, which is the call sign of the 747 when President Trump is flying on it, and they thought it was really rude that these 747 pilots were so rude and disrespectful it wouldn't help these other pilots that were dealing with a medical emergency. Now, the last time I looked, this video had something like over 7 million views. And before we get into this video, I have one other huge aviation thing that I really want to do in my life, and that's to get on to Air Force One. After all my whining and crying, I eventually got to fly with the Blue Angels, and I somehow survived that. So I feel pretty confident that if I get a ride on a 747, which I fly all the time, I can safely survive that flight as well. Now, I'm guessing that the White House has been waiting for the new Dash 8 to come out before they invited me to get onto Air Force One, but I just want them to know, if they're watching, I will come do the classic version, which is actually what they call the 747 that President Trump flies on now. I will come do a vlog on that, and the new version, Dash 8, I'll come and do both. All right, let's get into this audio.
Pediatric passenger with severe food poisoning, escalating abdominal pain, suspected acute appendicitis with risk of an appendix rupture. Request immediate vectors and priority straight-in approach to Miami International. EMS standby requested.
American 186, unable at this time. Air Force One is on short final runway and movement area secured for VIP arrival. Next approach window in 13 minutes.
Now, the way these guys are talking, it seems really fake, but let's just see what goes on. The truth is that in flight, you do have medical emergencies. And on a freighter, for example, we don't have flight attendants, and the flight attendants, which most people don't know, are trained in all kinds of medical things. CPR, using the zappy machine that you always see in the shows like Clear. And on the freighters, we don't have that. We get trained on the zappy machine, and based off of the fact that I don't remember what the zappy machine is called, it's pretty safe to assume that if you're on my flight and have a heart medical emergency, the odds aren't very good for your survival, but we get trained in the basic stuff. In the zappy machine that we use, it tells you like where to put the pads. It does all the things, so because they know that we're not going to really be able to do it very well, it does all the things for us, and then it tells you like, okay, hit the green button, and then you hit the button, and then it resets the heart to get their heart back to normal or whatever. So we'd get basics on that. Normal airline pilots that are flying just passengers don't do that because they would never come out of the flight deck, because it could be a potentially bad situation that someone's setting up to pretend to have a fake heart attack. I'm sure you've seen the jail shows where people pretend to have a fake medical problem so they can get out of jail. Well, it could be the same where someone's pretending to have a fake medical problem so they can get into the flight deck. So on the freighters, it's different. There's no door, so we would just yank the guy out of the seat and start doing whatever needs to be done. On the passenger airlines, those flight attendants are trained to do things like that. The difference is that the way this is all taking place doesn't make sense. This is not how we do it, because when I fly passengers, we have the training to handle the passenger operations and the freighter operations, which is why the type of flying I do is really unique. But when we do the training with the passenger flights, what happens is the flight attendant is actually filling out a medical form. That medical form is then given up to us on the flight deck. From the flight deck, the pilots call into our dispatchers, who are the people on the ground that help us with all the different things that we need to do to safely complete a flight. And that dispatcher connects us with a medical doctor on the phone. Now, once we're on the phone, we take this sheet that the flight attendants gave us. We read all the information. We tell them like, oh, their heart rate is something, and their symptoms are this, and whatever the thing is. And most of the time on these flights, most flights, there is some medical professional in there. There's a nurse, there's a doctor, there's somebody who can do the things that medical people do, which are going to be obviously more trained than our flight attendants are. Even though some of our flight attendants are nurses that you'll see when you're flying around, you wouldn't know it, but some of them are nurses. So they're going to relay that information to us on that sheet. From that sheet, the doctor is going to get all the information from us, and then based off of that information, they're going to say something like, hey, that's a medical emergency, you need to divert, or hey, it's not really a big deal, just continue your flight. And these are really critical choices, because sometimes you're over the middle of the ocean. Sometimes you could be over a place that would be a very inhospitable place to go. But if it's life or death, the doctor is going to make that decision. Then with the dispatcher is going to start coordinating all the different things on the ground to get the performance or the weather or find an airport that we can safely get to quickly. They're going to be doing all that stuff based off of what the doctor said. It's a lot of stuff. I've had to do diversions before. The workload is a lot. What would not be happening is we would not be doing this, where we're reading off all the symptoms to air traffic control. Because, for one, air traffic control does not care. They're not doctors, they can't really do anything with that information. And then two, you're jamming up the airways to get clearance to go to an airport that you need to get to on the ground safely. Now he's stating that he wants to get in and do an approach into Miami International.
Request immediate vectors and priority straight-in approach to Miami International.
The thing is that it's kind of implying that they're just slotting the president in so the president can get in and land, and then the traffic's going to be right behind them or right near to them, and that's just not how it works. I was actually in D.C. when President Obama was leaving the White House on Air Force One. I was at Reagan, and I remember watching him leave in Marine One, standing there, watching the helicopter fly away from there, seeing it on TV, and standing there at Reagan, watching that happen. And our flight was delayed. And I remember calling air traffic control like, hey, do you have an idea of like when Marine One's going to take off so we can kind of like plan? And he was like, yeah, we're not going to tell you that. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll just go back to the terminal. So we went back to the terminal and just sat there for a while until that was all done, and he went whatever he went after that. And then we boarded everybody up and we went. So they give a lot of space when these presidents are doing takeoffs and landings or in movement in anywhere. You've seen them where they like close down all the freeways. They do the same thing in the skies. They don't let anybody into a bubble at all near them, and especially when it comes to takeoff and landing and the moving around on the field. So this whole idea that it's kind of like slotted in and he's just a couple minutes behind, that's not realistic at all. Now, when you do have a medical emergency, you are able to make a request saying like, hey, I need to get into this airport.
Mayday, 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 Wisco 19 Foxtrot. Medical issue on board, request diversion to Cologne.
But the way in which he would be handling this doesn't make any sense. I'm pretty sure it's fake, but let's see what happens next. Whoever's making this video has no idea what a 747 looks like or doesn't care. And obviously that's not a 747, and it's only Air Force One when President Trump is on it. So anyways, it doesn't really make any sense, but let's see what they end up talking about next.
Unable 13, condition is time critical. Pain worsening, persistent vomiting, fever trending up, medical professional on board, recommends urgent surgical evaluation. Request immediate straight in.
American 186, clearance denied. Hold as instructed. Any unauthorized approach will prompt FAA review and administrative action.
Confirming, a VIP arrival is being prioritized over a time-sensitive pediatric emergency with appendix rupture risk.
American 186, procedures are mandatory. Landing without clearance subjects crew to certificate action and removal from duty.
Understood.
Yeah, this is 100% fake. The reality is that if you were 13 minutes outside of Miami, in any direction, you'd have a lot of alternatives you needed to go to if you needed to land. And now I'm going to talk from the perspective of flying a 747, which really limits my airports. But let's use Miami, which oddly enough is where I'm at right now. But if you were in Miami, I would be thinking, okay, we got Fort Lauderdale. That's not that far away. Or you got Palm Beach. If the weather was bad in Fort Lauderdale, you could go there. What if you're on the west side of Miami? Great, turn around, let's go over to Fort Myers. You got some alternatives to land over there. A pilot who's sitting there and arguing with air traffic control about like, I have priority that I want to go and land, he's not doing his job in reality. He's just arguing and delaying. If this was a medical emergency that he had on board, arguing with them isn't going to make anything happen faster. It would be like, hey, this is where I want to go. Okay, well, that airport's closed, so what's your plan B? That's all it would be like. It would be kind of like, oh, I want to divert to this airport, which happened to me once. One time we were flying, we were over Ohio, a big ice storm came in. The place we were going to go to, it closed down because the ice had came over the runway. And then we were like, okay, great, we're going to go over here. And when we're getting ready to go to that airport, they're like, bad news, that airport closed as well. We're like, oh, crap. So then we had to divert to another place that we ended up being right over. I want to say it was Cincinnati. And we just like, from like 30,000 feet, we just dive bombed down to land because we were worried that was going to get closed out as well. So it's be the exact same situation like, hey, you want to go to the airport? Well, that airport's closed, so come up with another plan. Arguing with air traffic control like, no, we want to go land at that iced up runway. It would be the same as arguing with them about, hey, we want to go land where Air Force One is landing right now. It's just not going to happen, so you're just wasting time. You're not doing your job. But the thing is I started looking at comments like this and I realized people think this is real. The thing about being a pilot is it's all safety related. Safety for the completion of the flight, safety of your passengers and your crew, safety of whatever it is that you're doing to safely complete the flight. All that stuff is like the priority, right? Well, if that is a priority, you wouldn't be arguing. You'd be, how quickly can I get this person on the ground? So this isn't heroic at all. It's actually really stupid. Let's see what happens next.
I'm responsible for every soul on board. The child's status is deteriorating by the minute. Safety of flight requires priority landing.
American 186, last advisory. Federal law enforcement staged at the gate. Continuing the approach will result in post-landing administrative processing.
Copy advisory. Safe landing comes first. Any administrative matters can follow. American 186 committing to land at Miami International.
Okay, so part of this is true. It is true that if you have an emergency, you can start breaking rules. Because if you declare a Mayday with an emergency, you can, in the interest of safety, do something. Like, let's say you wanted to go 330 knots below 10,000 feet in order to save somebody's life. I think if the FAA were to review that, they would go like, okay, yeah, you're breaking the rules, but you were thinking about the safety of the person and them surviving, then I understand that. You can't, however, do something where you jeopardize the lives of the other 400 people on your aircraft to get one person safely on the ground. That wouldn't be safe. So you couldn't do something really reckless, but for me, for example, I've trained doing that because we train for things like cargo fires right after takeoff, and we're at like 3,000 feet and there's a fire alarm and it's like, okay, great. And we train for that situation. So I feel like if something were to happen and I needed to get on the ground quickly, I could go at 330 knots until I got close to the runway and then do all the things I needed to do to get the plane safely on the ground, save that person, hopefully save their life, and not jeopardize my aircraft, my crew, my passengers if I had passengers on board. I feel like I could safely do that. But you can't do something that's reckless or stupid, like go land at a place where you shouldn't be landing or an airport that's closed because you felt like you wanted to do it. That's not the same thing. And most of you know I hate misinformation, and that's why I did things like roasting these TikTokers when they told you some of the dumbest ideas of how to survive in a plane crash. And this is really no different because you're taking some information, you're misleading people that this is the right way to do it, and you can supersede whatever rules are out there. So you might get a person who's a new pilot, and they're watching something like this, and they're thinking like, oh, okay, so yeah, this guy's the hero based off all the comments, so that's the way I should act in this situation. And it's actually completely the opposite. This is a terrible decision. It's terrible crew resource management while you're working with air traffic control if you're there by yourself. It's terrible in every different way. However, it's also not even realistic. Nobody would ever do this. And when I see view counts like this and comments like this, it lets me know there's a lot of people believe that this is real and that this is how it should be. I'm not the internet police. I just try to bring value in every video that I do, which seems to be something that has dropped out of our society, where they're just like about views or about likes and have no idea or concept of adding value. And that seems especially true on social media. It's just like this drive for likes and clicks. But this type of misinformation is terrible. And that's why I always, when I see something like this, I aggressively go after it, because you're spreading bad information like the TikTokers telling you how to survive. Obviously, that to me is more risky because more people are passengers than are pilots, and I would hope that a pilot would have some common sense, but that's not always the case. I've seen some pilots that lack a lot of common sense, and if you have people that are putting out information like this, and they're seeing it as, oh, this is a professional airline pilot at whatever airline, and that is the way that they would handle an emergency. It's like, oh, I don't have snacks on my plane, like I can do whatever I want because it's for me and I want to do it. And that's kind of what they're saying is the okay way to behave. And if you're looking to an airline pilot and going, well, that's how they behave, so here's me, a pilot with 50 hours, like clearly that's how they're doing it, that's how I should do it. And that's not true. Or, as President Trump would say,
you are fake news.
I think if you're putting something out in the world that you're portraying as being realistic or real when it is actually fiction, I feel like there should be some type of a disclosure that you are to say like, hey, this isn't real, this is something that's make-believe, or that I made it with AI. I feel like there should be some type of disclosure there, because otherwise, to me, this is just dishonest and portrays something that isn't actually true. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.